Hello, welcome back to the Life Nurse podcast. Hope you all are doing well today. November is such a fun month in watches. I think it's a time where you get to have the opportunity to look and watch and enjoy the auction season. There were a ton of auctions that went on over the last weekend, and I thought I would kind of give you my thoughts on how it all went. It definitely was an eventful time, I'll say that much. Most of the big auction houses had auctions that went on, and there was a real variety in the watches that were sold. I also think that we've kind of come to sort of a modest time, it feels like, with a lot of the auction results that we saw this weekend, but this is only sort of one pulse of the auction season. Of course, there's going to be some more as we go into next year, so I think that will be telling for sure. I'll also go over two watches that we got in that are pretty exciting for me. I've had one of them in the past and fell in love with them again and decided to pick two of them up again. So I'll talk about that towards the end of the show. First auction I wanted to discuss was Antiquorum, because I think Antiquorum was such a fun auction to see the results of and watch online. If you don't know, they had their important modern and vintage timepiece auction that took place in Geneva. There were 481 lots. I'll put a link in the show notes to the of this podcast to the results so you can see them. But it was such an exciting auction because I think Antiquorum demonstrated the variety of watches you can get. The variety that you can get, and had something for every price range, and that's why I really loved it. So 481 lots. It took place on the 5th and 6th of November, so that was Saturday and Sunday, and their sales totaled 8.83 million Swiss francs. So I think if you just open up the link that I sent you, you'll see that lot 1 was a Gobelin black dial, yellow gold, anti-magnetic triple date with moon phase watch. How cool is that? It's not a modern Rolex. It's not a modern Patek Philippe. It's a vintage watch from the 1960s from a brand like Gobelin. If you go to lot 2, there was a Le Coultre Futurematic with a black dial and yellow gold from the 1960s. That lot ended up selling for 2,500 Swiss francs. The variety is just what I love about Antiquorum, and in many instances, the affordability. And what's really cool is, sure, it's a little bit more affordable, but the quality of watches that they're selling aren't diminished by that at all. This Le Coultre Futurematic, the case is in really nice condition. The dial is super clean, even patina on the lume plots. Such great detailing and really high quality movement from Le Coultre. But they did have things that were a little bit more out there. As an example, lot number 7, they had a Universal Aero Compact retailed by Gambino from the 1960s, 38 millimeter, beautiful watch, sold for 4,500. They had some other fairly significant pieces. I'll just quickly scroll through here just to take a look at them. But there are so many cool watches. I posted this one on Instagram. Lot number 14 was a Zenith S58 in steel with an incredibly beautiful brown dial, 37 millimeters from 1958. What an amazing watch, and a beautiful piece for 2,500. So, I think Antiquorum was sort of for if you were looking for something that maybe, for me, I think Antiquorum is the place to start if you're looking to sort of dip your toe into vintage watches, into the auction world, because they sell very, very high quality watches of so many different watch brands, and I think that's what's exciting. They also do a really nice job providing details of these watches. And I think that's what I really loved about seeing this. I think for the most part they had a nice range of watches selling for affordable prices, but they also had some pretty big hitters. Like lot number 193 was a Patek Philippe 5170 with a black dial in 18 karat white gold. And oh, sorry, wrong auction. I apologize for that one. I was looking at the wrong one. I meant lot number 194. That was a reference 5040 perpetual calendar moon phase leap year indicator in 18 karat pink gold from 1995, and that sold for 32,500. And so you had, if you had the opportunity to see different watches out there, which I thought was quite nice. One of my favorite lots, it's no secret, was lot number 200 from them, which was reference 1463. Two-tone silver dial with applied brigade numbers. It's as described by Antiquorum, an extremely fine and rare, attractive manual wind stainless steel chronograph watch with brigade numbers. This one was sold in February 1951 by Patek Philippe and sold for 475,000 Swiss francs. So you had something like a Futurematic that was lot number 2 that sold for 2,500, but then you also had 1463 at this auction. I think this reaffirmed Antiquorum's commitment to providing high-quality watches of all brands that you may be interested in at varying price points, but all with the same high quality and high level of skill required when producing these pieces. So really, for me, I think it was really cool. They also had some like interesting just like tidbits. So as an example, lot 277 was just it was a reference 1579 from Patek Philippe. It was just a dial, which I thought was kind of interesting that they sold. The variety was definitely there, and they had some clocks and all those types of things. So, how awesome. So Antiquorum was one of them. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch that auction. I ended up watching the Phillips Geneva watch auction for most of the weekend, but I followed along and looked at the prices as they sold, and it was quite cool to see all that happen. As I said, there'll be a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. We move on to Christie's. Christie's had sort of two categories of auctions that took place. They had their legendary and unique watches auction that took place on November 6th, which was Sunday, and then they had their rare watches auction that took place today, November 7th. As you can tell, I'm recording this the day before we release this podcast. Reason being is I wanted to see what all the results were. So in their legendary and unique watches, they had a variety of watches, but as described by the auction house, this remarkable auction of legendary and unique watches is an entirely unique phenomenon. It represents unquestionably the most important grouping of significant timepieces from many of the great watchmakers and brands over the past 30 years, including momentous historical landmarks, among others Richard Mille, François Pauljon, Gérard Perregaux, and Audemars Piguet. The overwhelming theme of auction is the world of high-performance motor racing, in particular Ferrari and Formula One. Indeed, many of the watches directly reflect the world of motorsports and have direct links to great names in Formula One, including Michael Schumacher. The selection is particularly rich in unique pieces and prototypes, often specially made and dedicated to the makers themselves. One of the chief glories of this auction is one of the most important groups of Richard Mille early prototype wristwatches ever offered at auction, many of which have been seen publicly before. And so, as you can tell from the description of this, many of these pieces had a direct link to motorsports. So, as an example, lot number 1 for them was a Gérard Perregaux split-second chronograph in 18 karat yellow gold, which has a Ferrari logo at 12 o'clock. It was sold in 1993, and so Ferrari logo obviously is gonna make this watch stand out, and so a lot of connection to motorsports. As mentioned, there was an extremely important collection of Richard Mille Richard Mille watches that were sold. during this auction. I'll get to that in a second. I'm kind of just scrolling through the lots. One of my favorites was lot 2027, which was an FP Journe Unique Platinum Limited Edition flyback chronograph with date. Take a look at this lot. It really is beautiful. It's from 2004. Incredibly beautiful watch from FP Journe. I'll quickly skip down to the Richard Mille because there really was and there's a lot of nice coverage that Christie's did about these watches, which I think I'm seeing a little bit more of. People trying, watch auction houses trying to cover some more of their watches on YouTube and creating sort of lasting videos about some of the watches that they're auctioning. I think it's a good sort of marketing technique for them because that's how you're going to get people into the auction room to bid on the watches. There was a lot of Richard Mille's, but as an example, lot what lot am I looking at here? Lot 2065 was an exceptionally rare and important prototype ultra lightweight metal matrix composite skeletonized tourbillon wristwatch with aluminum lithium movement and guarantee. This was Philippe Massa Tourbillon RM009 prototype, and this was number 3 from 2005. There's a really nice essay on this model. The watch is obviously named after the Brazilian Formula One racing driver Felipe Massa, one of the first sporting figures to have joined the Richard Mille family as a brand ambassador. And in 2005, the same year the RM009 was launched, Massa began driving Ferrari, finishing third that season. So as you can tell, fairly significant prototype from Richard Mille. It ended up selling for just shy of 1.5 million Swiss francs, and many of the other results were like this. I didn't really follow this auction too closely. I'm a little bit more interested in vintage watches when I'm into auctions, so that was a little bit more down my alley. Christie's also today on November 7th had the rare watches auction. This had a varying collection of significant watches from the likes of Rolex, Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constant, and many, many more, A. Lange & Söhne. There were some significant watches, as always, that were sold. What's pretty evident with this auction was lot number 34, which was a Tiffany blue dial 5711. It ended up selling for 3.174 million Swiss francs. Just a wild figure for something like that. I also noticed that the first 4 lots of this auction were the now discontinued Stella Oyster Perpetuals that they released recently. Interestingly enough, so they had the orange, the yellow, and the green. That was lot 1, 2, and 3, and they sold for 25,000, 21,000, 21,000 in that order. Lot number 4 was the Tiffany blue Oyster Perpetual, and that sold for 53,000 USD. Kind of insane that these are the prices that they're fetching, but continues to show that the obscure to Rolex references is what people are attracted to, and I couldn't agree more. I think that shows collectability, in my opinion. Rolex is a phenomenal brand. They produce phenomenal watches, and I think the ability for them to change maybe some of the models that they have is limiting, and I think these Oyster Perpetual shows the fun that they can kind of have with their watches. But now they're discontinued, so who knows what they're going to do this next year with those watches. I do wonder if they'll maybe have something that will come out. Lot 69 was also kind of cool. They had a Cartier Crash. This was a crash from 1991, estimated 120 to 180,000 Swiss francs, sold for 214. Cartier crashes are really popular. It's kind of nice to see, actually, that I think people are going towards more elegant, smaller watches. I think some people make comments about how smaller watches are now in. I think you can't make sweeping statements like that, but I do think they're getting more attention than they used to, which I think is cool. A lot of really beautiful lots on this. Again, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to all of these, so you can check it out. I encourage you to do so. There was a reference 130, lot 90, which was cool to see. I love the 130. It is smaller. It's a Patek Philippe chronograph with brigade numbers, but on the smaller side. This one had leaf hands from 1944, 33 millimeters in diameter. For me, it fits my wrist really nicely, and I enjoy wearing it. But I think for some, it might be a little too small. So nice variety, very beautiful watches, and I can quickly scroll up here, tell you the total that this auction actually fetched, because I didn't do that at the beginning. Oh, wait, there's one more that I wanted to talk about before we go, and this was featured on Christie's Instagram page, actually. It was the last lot. 128 was a very, very rare and highly important 18-karat gold chronograph, Lemon Paul Newman. So this is the reference 6239 Paul Newman Daytona. Excuse me. It's a 6263 Paul Newman Daytona from 1969. What was interesting about this lot is it's a 6263, but the case back is Sam 6239. Make of that what you will. But a cool reference either way. It ended up fetching 3.414 million Swiss francs, an incredible sum of money. I think the reason why it went for so much is condition. The condition of this watch is pretty good. You can still see a really beautiful hallmark on the lug, and the case metal inscription as well. Movement's also in phenomenal condition if you take a look at the pictures on this lot. So check out the show notes if you want to see this. So all in all, the rare watch auction fetched just shy 23.67 million Swiss francs. A nice result from them, and congratulations to Christie's for your results. The last auction that took place over the last couple of days was the Geneva watch auction number 16. This was a great auction. Took place between November 5th and 6th. That means Saturday and Sunday of this last weekend. Some really beautiful lots. I want to make a quick note. I was in New York, and I decided to go to Phillips to pick up one of the catalogs. Phillips is one of the last auction houses to offer a catalog where you can tangibly see the watches instead of going to their online catalog. There are many different ways you can look at this. There is something about printing catalogs that can be considered bad for the environment. I totally understand that. I also understand that it takes money to print catalogs, and so it might be a place where you can do the environment a favor and also help your the margins. But I do think that there is a different feel about having a catalog and being able to follow an auction while having a catalog. So I went to Phillips and asked for a catalog, and unfortunately I think they hadn't unpacked them or something, but they had an exhibit on I think postmodern art, so I decided just to go and watch that, or go and take a look at that. And what was really cool is the representative at Phillips came to me while I was at the exhibition and gave me one of the catalogs. Big shout out to you. You know who you are if you're going to listen to this. I doubt you will be, but really want to say a huge thank you for your kindness. And yeah, I don't really have much more to say besides thank you. So By the way, catalog is absolutely exceptional. If I get a moment, I'll maybe create a YouTube video so I can show you all the catalog. It really is a beautiful, beautifully put together, and some nice information on it. So tons of lots. I think they had 232 lots over the two-day period. Everything from modern to vintage watches, some really beautiful watches that were sold. But one thing that was quite cool is it was interesting. Well, a couple things. There were a lot of watches in this auction where the owners said anything over the retail price of this watch would be donated to charity, or the full amount of this watch would be donated to charity. I thought that was really cool. It's doing good with something that we love, and I really enjoyed that. I also just I think something else I wanted to talk through is it felt kind of soft. I don't know if that was me just like expecting crazy records all the time, but it felt like things weren't selling for these exorbitant amounts of money, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we are kind of tapering off right now, or we're in sort of we're all kind of taking a breath and seeing where we are macroeconomically. Like, totally could be the direction that we're going in. But it did feel like we kind of took a deep breath and are going to take a look at what's going to happen. But some really incredible results. Obviously, there was a ton of things that were being celebrated during this auction. I've covered a couple of the lots that I thought were quite interesting, I believe, on this podcast before. I highly recommend you take a look at the Phillips website so you can see the auction results. One of the most significant watches that sold was obviously George Daniel's personal watch called the Spring Case Tourbillon. This watch has an incredibly beautiful case that allows you to pop out where the dial side of the watch is. Allows you to pop it out and reveal the back side of the watch where there's this beautiful tourbillon being sold or being operating. It's sold for over 4 million Swiss francs, which I believe was the most expensive lot at auction. There was also a beautiful anniversary from George Daniels that sold for just shy of 700,000 Swiss francs. I believe that is a record. And some pretty cool watchmaking there. I mentioned the Tiffany Blue Dial Oyster Perpetuals that sold at the Rare Watches auction by Christie's. Interestingly, the one that Christie's sold for 53,000. The one at Phillips, which was lot number 1, sold for 30,000 Swiss francs. There's a real difference there. I'll let you analyze the two watches to figure out what the difference was. But a pretty significant difference between those two watches. There were incredible watches. There's the only known 2499 that was manufactured and sold with a black dial, according to the extracts in the archives. There was a beautiful salmon dial 5070. The list really goes on with the watches that they were able to source. I think Phillips' ability to source some the variety and quality of watches was quite astonishing. They also, again, vintage, modern. They had a little bit of everything in this auction. They had some really cool prototype Speedmasters that were fairly rare and went for a decent amount, and I'm sure the Speedmaster collector who got these would be very, very happy to have them as part of their collections. There was a Zerograph Rolex reference 3933, which was sold by buyer that went for 138,000. That was a really exciting bit of bidding. The two bidders really took their time, and that was quite cool. There was a Tiffany reference 130, which I had mentioned from the Rare Watches auction as well. The list really goes on. I don't want to go through all of these lots just to bore you, but I highly recommend taking a look at the lots. If you don't follow these auctions, I think it's a really nice place to learn about vintage watches. One, because the catalogs give you some really nice detail about the watches and the histories of them. Two, I think it also just gives you a pulse of like what these watches are like quality wise. I highly recommend going and visiting these auction houses when they have exhibitions of these watches, so you can feel them in your hand and see them on your wrist, because that's a really great way of learning what these watches are like in person. So some pretty cool watches at this auction. One more thing I wanted to give a shout out to was MB&F had 2 watches featured in the Phillips Geneva watch auction. They had a LM Perpetual, which sold for $176,000, and they had a HM3 Sidewinder that sold for $52,000. Nice to see independents making their mark in these auctions. Last thing I wanted to mention was just a note about a reference 5270T that is being auctioned by Oral Box. It is a unique 5070T that is going to be sold. This is the first reference 5270T available in titanium, a metal that Patek Philippe uses only in very rare instances. This watch is going to be auctioned at the children's auction, it was donated by Patek Philippe to raise money for this charity auction. There's a video that Phillips made to describe both the auction and the watch, and I highly recommend you watch it. I'll put a link in the description to the Phillips article and the video, so you can take a look at that to understand really what Patek Philippe is doing here. It's a unique piece. The tile is just wild, and it's incredible emerald green dial. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about it too much here, but I recommend that you read the article and watch the video if you haven't seen it. All right, so last thing I wanted to talk about was 2 watches that we got in. So if you don't know, I love MB&F. I think it's pretty easy for someone to know that if you've followed me or Life on the Wrist at all. And obviously the designs of the watches are pretty crazy. I had the opportunity to explore a lot of their watches, and one of the watches that I thought was really cool was the I believe it's the HM5. Let me make sure I don't want to misquote here. Because I don't want to send you guys down the wrong path. Yes, the HM5. So the HM5 is a watch where it was inspired by basically the back of a car from the 1970s. And it was also inspired by a watch that was released in 1976 called the Amida Digitrends, which was a watch that looks very, very similar to the HM5, where you actually have a jumping hours mechanism with a horizontal time display that's projected onto sapphire glass. These watches were about 40 millimeters in diameter and came in 2 variations, one in stainless steel and one with a PVD finishing to it. The watches, the movements in these watches were a very simple. I think it was like a lever escapement, one jewel movement, which is really nothing too special, and broke fairly often, and so a lot of the times the movements were replaced by watchmakers. I had the opportunity to have one of the PVD finished Amida Digitrends a couple of years ago that I really enjoyed experiencing. In really great condition. PVD was in good condition as well. And an absolute, just super fun watch to be able to experience. I kind of was reminiscing about that watch and had gotten a lot of inquiries about it because I do have some fairly detailed pictures and an article on our website about this watch. And so I ended up sourcing 2 Amida Digitrends, which was really cool. Both of them are stainless steel, so I don't have the black PVD finished ones, but I do have 2 of them. And they're in pretty great condition. It's such a fun watch to wear because when someone looks at it or sees it on your wrist, it's not something they would expect, and so you kind of have to do a little bit of work to explain what you actually have on your wrist. But a really fun watch to have. I'll put links in the show notes so you can see them both. I'm going to be covering both of them in a video on our website, so stay tuned for that. But I thought I would just mention it in case you like the Amida Digitrend and wanted to check out some cool pictures about it. Well, this is a 30-minute podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. I hope it was fun kind of talking through these auctions. I'll put a link in the show notes to all the auctions. Congratulations to Antiquorum, Christie's, and Phillips for your wonderful auctions that you hosted and the results that you had. I'm positive that the buyers of these watches that you had listed and auctioned off are happy with their purchases, and I'm equally as positive that the sellers are going to be happy as well with the results. If you are new to Live from this podcast, be sure to follow us, and if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating, it really does help me out. Check out our website if you want some more content from me. You can also follow us on our social media accounts if you want some more daily content from me. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and until next time.